Good morning. My name is Renee. Welcome to Wealth Chat. I am your wealth coach. I teach people how to afford their dreams by purchasing assets through real estate, stocks, crypto, and and entrepreneurship. And so I just wanted to come on here today and talk about legacy and just in celebration. Good morning, Terrence. Sorry about that. And talk about in celebration of Black History Month. And I just wanted to say, and Terrence, I'm glad that you're here. I just wanted to talk about legacy and how that I'm just finding out in the past, or just the light bulb is clicking where I am the fourth generation of landowners, real estate owners, business owners. My grandfather planted seeds in me back when I was a little girl. And so my grandfather, your great-grandfather, and his father, which is my great-grandfather, purchased over 100 acres of land in South Carolina. And over the years, the city came in and put roads and purchased some lands. But my grandfather had 11 children. And so on the land, they grew cotton, they grew tobacco. My grandfather had a store on his property. He farmed the land. He had animals, pigs and chickens. So the land was very prosperous. He bought land that made money for him. And so even on the land, there was a pecan tree. I can remember it was in the front yard. We were sitting on the porch and all summer we would eat as many pecans that we wanted to. Do you know how much pecans are today to go and buy pecans? And so anytime, so when my father's siblings, as they got older, they all moved away to other cities and states. And there was a couple that stayed in South Carolina. But for the most part, everybody dispersed and moved away. But even when they moved away, my grandfather rented out portions of his land to other farmers. He had a store on his land, to whereas he would get up every morning. So we would get up, there was a routine. We would get up every morning. He would get up before us, but then we would get up after us. My grandmother would make him a homemade breakfast, biscuits from scratch. So we would cook breakfast. He would eat his breakfast. He would go over to the store. So back in the day, I mean, that had to be back in the late 60s, early 70s. He had a convenience store right there next door to his house. And right across the street, that was land that was part of the 100 acres. And when my great-grandfather passed away, he, of course, my grandfather had siblings, so they inherited, my great-grandfather's portions of the land. But across the street was where his brother owned, and so he sold it. And so across the street there was a factory. So every day the factory workers would come across the street to my grandfather's store and have lunch. So my grandfather would go over, get the store going. We would do our morning chores. We would clean and do, what we needed to do. And then by a certain time, we would then go over to the store and we would season up and fry up some pork chops and make sandwiches for them to have lunch. Now, this is something my grandfather, so that was the business part of him. He wouldn't let anybody call him a farmer. He called himself a merchant, so, but what I'm saying is he bought land that produced income for him. So even after everybody dispersed, he rented out his land. He didn't sell it. He rented it out. And to this day, we still own the land. And so it has been passed down through generations. And so I was a recipient of owning the land with some of his siblings because he passed away. And so my grandfather, made, you know, his children promised that they would never sell out the land, because back in the day, if you own land in South Carolina, you either lost it, it was stolen, they just found ways to take your land. And so my grandfather held onto his land all this time. And so today's title is about legacy. What do you bring? I say legacy has the words leg in it. So each generation that it gets passed down to, you have to add to the legacy so that it can keep growing and stay stable. And so it's not a coincidence that I'm into real estate or that I'm into entrepreneurship. It's not uncommon, because my grandfather planted those seeds in me, and we're passing them down to our children. And so, my daughter, my nephew's on here. It's inevitable. You're going to own land and property because our grandfather, your great-grandfather, made sure my father, because now my uncle and his family owns the land. Sometimes the land, is staying in the family, but it gets passed around to different siblings. And so, I encourage you. There are some of you that have purchased property this year. And so when you buy your properties, or if you buy your land, just look around and see how can you add value, because the land will produce fruit. And so it could be lucrative land, just like my grandfather's land. He had pecan trees, which he could have just sold his pecans out front if he wanted to, because that's land producing money to take care of the family. He had farmland, he grew tobacco, he grew cotton, and then when everybody dispersed, he didn't give up. He had a store next door that he would take care of the factory workers, feed them lunch. They come over and get a cold Coke. I can remember that as a little girl. And so that's something, again, look for ways to add value. Look for ways to where your land produces fruit. And that's all I have for today. Thank you guys for watching. For those that are watching the replay, thank you. For those that are watching me on YouTube and Instagram, share some of your family legacies that have been passed down in celebration of Black History Month. Bye for now.